The Whispering Woods. The forest loomed dark and ancient, its towering pines clawing at the sky as if trying to block out the sun. Locals called it the Whispering Woods, a name whispered with unease and avoided in polite conversation. Nestled at the edge of the town of Black Hollow, the forest's sinister reputation was built on countless tales of hikers who ventured in and never returned. It started with a group of friends, 4 college students, Claire, David, Megan, and Jake, who laughed in the face of superstition. They were thrill seekers, drawn to the unknown like moths to a flame. When they heard the stories of the Whispering Woods, they saw not a warning, but a challenge. "It's just a forest," Claire had said, her hazel eyes gleaming with defiance. "Trees and shadows. What's the worst that could happen?" Jake had grinned, shouldering his camera bag. "Let's document it. Prove to everyone that the stories are just ghost tales for kids." The others agreed, though Megan's enthusiasm was more muted. "We should at least let someone know where we're going," she had suggested, earning a dismissive wave from David. They set off on a crisp October morning, the air filled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. The entrance to the woods was marked by an old wooden sign, its letters faded and worn. "Whispering Woods. Enter at your own risk." The first few hours were uneventful. The forest was beautiful in its own way, sunlight filtering through the canopy and casting golden patches on the forest floor. Jake took photos of moss-covered stones and gnarled roots, while Claire led the group deeper, her confidence unshaken. But as the day wore on, the atmosphere shifted. The light grew dimmer, though no clouds marred the sky. The trees seemed to close in, their trunks pressing together like silent sentinels. A cold wind whispered through the branches, carrying with it a sound that made Megan's blood run cold. It was faint, almost imperceptible at first. A soft murmuring, like voices just out of earshot. "Did you hear that?" Megan asked, her voice trembling. "Hear what?" David replied, but his bravado had dimmed. He glanced around, his hand tightening on the strap of his backpack. "It's probably just the wind," Claire said, though her steps slowed. "Let's keep moving." The murmuring grew louder as they pressed on, weaving through the dense underbrush. Jake stopped to adjust his camera, aiming it toward the shadowy depths of the trees. "What are you doing?" Claire hissed. "Let's not waste time." "Hold on," Jake said, his voice distant. "I thought I saw something. A figure." "Don't joke about that," Megan snapped, her patience frayed. "I'm not," Jake said, his eyes narrowing. But when he looked through the lens again, the figure was gone. By late afternoon, they realized they were lost. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions, its labyrinthine paths leading nowhere. David's phone had no signal, and the GPS was useless under the dense canopy. "We should head back," Megan urged, her voice rising with panic. "We can come back with better gear or a guide." "We'll find our way," Claire insisted, though doubt flickered in her eyes. She turned to Jake, but he was staring into the distance, his face pale. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "See what?" Claire demanded, following his gaze. "Something moved. Over there." He pointed to a cluster of trees where the shadows seemed deeper, more alive. "Let's go," David said firmly, tugging Jake's sleeve. "We're just spooking ourselves." But as they turned to leave, the murmuring rose to a crescendo. It wasn't the wind. It was voices, dozens of them, whispering words they couldn't understand. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Panic set in. They broke into a run, tripping over roots and ducking under low-hanging branches. The forest seemed alive, its shadows twisting and reaching for them. Megan screamed as a branch snagged her jacket, convinced for a moment that something had grabbed her. They didn't stop until they stumbled into a small clearing, gasping for breath. In the center stood an ancient stone well, its surface covered in moss and strange carvings. The whispers fell silent. "What is this?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't like it," Megan said, backing away. "It's just a well," David said, though his voice wavered. He stepped closer, peering into the darkness below. "Don't," Jake warned, but David ignored him. The moment he leaned over the edge, the forest erupted in sound. The whispers became screams, deafening and otherworldly. David recoiled, clutching his head, but it was too late. From the well, a shadow emerged. It was formless at first, a writhing mass of darkness that coalesced into something vaguely human. Eyes, if they could be called that, glowed like embers, fixed on the group. "Run!" Claire screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the cacophony. They scattered, each fleeing in a different direction. Megan's cries echoed briefly before being cut off. Jake's camera clattered to the ground, its lens cracked. Claire tripped and fell, the shadow closing in on her as she scrambled to her feet. David was the last to fall silent, his screams lingering in the air long after the forest returned to its unnatural stillness. Days later, a search party was organized. The townspeople knew better than to venture too deep, but they found traces near the forest's edge. A torn piece of fabric, Jake's broken camera, and a notebook belonging to Claire. The final entry read, "The whispers are everywhere. They're in my head, pulling me deeper. There's no escape. If you find this, don't look for us. Don't follow the voices." No bodies were ever recovered, and the Whispering Woods claimed its place in the town's dark lore. Some say you can still hear the students' voices in the wind, warning others to stay away. But the forest doesn't forgive trespassers, and it never lets them go.